A lot of West Virginia fans are freaking out because of the transfer portal, and I get it. 18 players, that's a lot. But how do we compare against the rest of the nation? Because we're not the only ones that have been affected by the transfer portal. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. And if you notice, my background looks a little different today. That's because I'm over here at my parents' visiting some family, so I'm using the basement. So all those comments about how I'm a YouTuber in my parents' basement, well, for this video, you're actually correct. A lot of West Virginia fans are freaking out because 18 of our players have transferred, and that's a pretty good chunk. But it's definitely not the highest chunk in the nation. So I was going to compare us to the other people that have some big chunks going into the transfer portal. So first up, I wanted to talk about the Big 12. Where do we fall in the Big 12 as far as players entering the transfer portal? Right off the bat, there's two names out of West Virginia that will affect us in 2021. Dreshun Miller, our 4-star cornerback, and Tyke Smith, our 4-star safety. That will hurt. But last year, we were such a dominant defense that even a step back isn't going to be all that bad. I expect West Virginia to still be a top 25 defense in 2021. So here's how the Big 12 looks as it relates to the transfer portal. Iowa State got affected the least. They only had 7 people enter the transfer portal, and those were 7 3-stars. Next is Oklahoma State. They only had 8 players enter the transfer portal. 1 4-star, 6 3-stars, and 1 player whose stars were not available. Next up is Baylor. They also had 8 players enter the transfer portal, but they had 2 4-stars, 4 3-stars, and 1 player whose stars are not available. Next is Kansas State, and there's a little bit of a gap here. Kansas State had 14 players enter the transfer portal. 11 of those were 3-stars, 1 of those was 2-star, and 2 of those players, their stars were not available. Next is Texas. They had 15 players enter the transfer portal. 3 of them were 4-stars. That's a pretty good little chunk of 4-stars. And 12 of them were 3-stars. The next 5 are the ones that were affected the most by the transfer portal in 2021. So first up, we have Texas Tech. They had 16 players enter the transfer portal. 13 of those were 3-stars. 1 of them was a 2-star, and 2 of them, their stars were not available. Next is West Virginia. West Virginia had 18 players enter the transfer portal. That's a lot of players. 3 of those were 4-stars. That hurts. 12 of them were 3-stars. 1 of them was a 2-star, and 2 of them, their stars were not available. But right along with West Virginia in the Big 12 is Oklahoma. They also had 18 players enter the transfer portal. 3 of theirs also were 4-stars. 12 of those also were 3-stars, and they had 2 that were 2-stars, and 1 of their players, their stars were not available. The team that was affected the second most in the Big 12 was TCU. They had 19 players enter the transfer portal in 2021. 3 of those were 4-stars, 13 of them were 3-stars, and 3 of their players, their stars were not available. Then, of course, the team that was affected the most by the transfer portal, Kansas. A lot of controversy is surrounding Kansas right now, and they just plain stink. They had 23 players enter the transfer portal this year. 1 of them was a 4-star, 11 of them were 3-stars, 5 of them were 2-stars, and 6 of them, their stars were not available. Yes, West Virginia did have 18 players go into the transfer portal, but we also received 3 players from the transfer portal. Oklahoma, the same amount as West Virginia, 18 going into the transfer portal. They received 7. TCU, who had 19 enter the transfer portal, they received 4. In Kansas, who had 23 enter the transfer portal, they received 3. Here are the other teams in the other Power 5 conferences that were affected either the same as or more than West Virginia. In the ACC, Georgia Tech, they had 18 players enter the transfer portal, but they received 9 from the transfer portal. North Carolina, this one surprised me. North Carolina had 20 players go into the transfer portal, and they only received 1. For the Big 10, Michigan State, same amount as West Virginia. 18 of their players went into the transfer portal, but they received 12 out of the transfer portal. To go along with them in the Big 10, Michigan, they had 19 players enter the transfer portal and just received 2 out of the transfer portal. In the Pac-12, only Washington State was affected just as much as West Virginia, but more. They had 21 players go into the transfer portal, and they received 5 out of the transfer portal. The SEC had 3 teams that were affected just as greatly as West Virginia, or more. First up, Vanderbilt. They had 19 players enter the transfer portal and received 3 out of the transfer portal. Mississippi State, they had 20 go into the transfer portal and received 5 out of the transfer portal. And then there's Tennessee. They got decimated. Check this out. They had 33 of their players enter the transfer portal and only received 4 out of the transfer portal. So Tennessee was affected the most out of any team out of the Power 5 conferences by the transfer portal. It is a little concerning because West Virginia is in the upper echelon as far as being affected the most by the transfer portal. But I do believe head coach Neal Brown is building something in West Virginia. We need to relax. As we can see, it is happening to big name schools like Oklahoma and North Carolina. So let's not jump to conclusions. Defense took the biggest hit, but we got some good transfers, including Lance Dixon from Penn State and Doug Nestor from Virginia Tech. Now, once the season starts, if we see that it affected us more than we thought, then there might be cause for concern. But right now, I'm telling you, relax. It happens. I'm not a big fan of the transfer portal, but it is what it is, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.